From Rote to Note, The Changing Spaces for Writing in the Classroom by Pamela McKinnon and Rachel Sparks. Molly Swords notes that individual writing slates were the dominant writing spaces of 18th and 19th century schools in Western Europe and North America. Robert Cohenrad identified slate as a type of metamorphic rock resulting from low-grade regional metamorphism of shale or mudstone. Judith Blizzard found that originally slate was used as a roofing material in the 6th century. However, by the 15th century, individual writing slates had been created and were the dominant writing technology used in schools. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, notebooks began to replace writing slates as a preferred space for writing. With this change in writing tools brought a significant change in teaching and learning. As the tools for writing evolved, so did the pedagogy of teaching and learning. Individual writing slates' prevalence in the classroom. Winneed notes that slate was a relatively easy material to mine and manufacture. It could be split into a variety of sizes and thicknesses, allowing for a wide range of writing slates to be produced and used in the classroom. The most common size slate was 5 by 7 inches and a half an inch thick. Slate boards could also be two-sided. Swords notes that refinements to writing slates over the years resulted in smaller, less bulky slates that were easier to carry. Wooden frames were added to strengthen the slates and lessen the chance of shattering when dropped. Thinner pieces of slate were also bound together with felt to create slate books. Swords further found that the surface of these slate books was coated with silicate to protect the slate from breaking. Although pencils and paper were being produced at the same time as writing slates, they were relatively more expensive and thus rarely used in classrooms. Writing slates were a one-time purchase and a tool that could be reused for many years. The writing slate's popularity increased with the development of manufacturing and transportation in the 18th century. Fernley notes that slates could be transported across Europe and North America and distributed to schools throughout the continents. To write on slate, another, softer piece of slate was used to etch into the writing tablet. A rag and saliva were then used to wipe the slate clean. Eventually, chalk became more popular to use rather than slate pencils. The first chalk used for the slate boards was a soft limestone that was easier to write and clean off the writing tablet. Individual writing slates' impact on teaching and learning. Individual writing slates enabled students to practice writing, solve math problems, and easily erase any errors. The teacher would circulate around the classroom, checking each student's work one by one. As the slates must regularly be wiped clean to copy the next problem or diction, there was no way to keep a record of student learning. Students were required to memorize what was taught. Therefore, rote learning, the memorization and recall of knowledge and facts, was a dominant method for teaching and learning in the 18th and 19th century classroom. Students were not able to bring work home to review or improve upon. They were expected to memorize as the teacher taught the lesson. Repetition or drill aimed to ensure students learned the curriculum. Another impact of individual writing slates on teaching and learning is that students were assessed orally. Teachers would test students' knowledge orally, checking to see that they had indeed memorized the information the teacher presented. In this style of assessment, few records were kept of student responses. Thus, there was little data on student learning. Individual writing slates led to the creation of a large chalkboard for the teacher to use in instruction. Fernley recounts that the first chalkboard was invented in Scotland when a geography teacher hung up all the students' slates together to display a map. Prior to this, teachers did not have a way to easily display information to students. A slate can be cut to any size. Larger size slates were then manufactured and distributed by train. This impacted teaching and learning, as teachers were now able to demonstrate and model problems as well as display information to the class. Students continued to use writing slates to copy and memorize information that was displayed on the chalkboard. Rote learning and the use of writing slates in the 18th and 19th centuries are a natural progression from oral cultures. Ong notes that in oral cultures, repetition is used as a way to gain the attention of the audience and reiterate meaning. Repetition often follows a pattern or formula so one can memorize information. The use of writing slates and rote learning mirrors the importance of repetition in oral cultures. Students must continually write the same problem or diction on the slate boards to ensure information is retained, as they will not be able to look back to their work later on.
From rote to note, personal notebooks become the norm. The invention of the steam-driven paper-making machines in the 20th century lowered the price of paper. At the same time, pencils became mass-produced. Coles states that By the 1870s, it was estimated that more than 20 million pencils were being sold in the United States each year. As paper became affordable and textbooks soon became commonplace, individual slates were replaced with personal notebooks. Although individual writing slates had been dominant in classrooms across North America and Europe for more than 100 years, they were not the ideal writing space. Slate boards had abrasive, uneven surfaces, were heavy, easily shattered, and didn't allow teachers or students to keep a record of student learning. Additionally, Sword's research revealed that writing slates were unhygienic as students, by and large, cleaned the surface with their saliva. As students used different writing slates each day, germs quickly spread among students via the writing slates. Personal notebooks were a vast improvement on writing slates. Personal notebooks, implication for teaching and learning. With the emergence of personal notebooks, students had a permanent record of their learning. No longer was the proof of their learning erased with each lesson. Now, students had a chronological record of what they knew and what they could do. Additionally, students also learned how to organize and display information, as students would now be able to look back on their learning and share it with their teachers, classmates, and parents. The organization and presentation of information became far more important than it had with the temporary writing space of the individual slate. Miller asserts that the information processing learning theory states that new information can only be retained when it is assimilated with pre-existing knowledge. The process of building on prior knowledge leads to more meaningful understanding. As writing spaces evolved from writing slates to personal notebooks, students were able to maintain a permanent record of their learning and build on prior knowledge. This was a significant shift from rote learning to more meaningful learning that allowed for reflection and revision. Bolter notes that in the act of writing, the writer externalizes his or her thoughts. The writer enters into a reflective and reflexive relationship with the written page, a relationship in which thoughts are bodied forth. In keeping a personal notebook, students became more sophisticated learners who were able to reflect on their learning and interact with it in a more meaningful way. Another implication for teaching and learning, with the introduction of personal notebooks and the use of pencils, was a new form of assessment. written tests. In the individual writing slate era, oral assessments were the most common method for teachers to assess student learning, as it was difficult to administer written tests on heavy slate. Coles notes that as personal notebooks and pencils became commonplace, thus was born an inexpensive way to measure the performance of thousands of students, something that could not have been done without the pencil. Teachers could easily collect in paper tests and grade them all at their leisure to assess student learning. Conclusion. In the evolution from writing slates to personal notebooks, significant changes occurred in teaching and learning. Individual writing slates begat rote learning. In an environment where the main writing space cannot hold a permanent record of student learning, rote learning becomes the norm. However, with the advance of personal notebooks, students began to create a permanent learning record. With the use of personal notebooks, students are able to review their learning and are allowed more opportunities to make connections to the new learning. Students are able to organize, display, and record information in a personal way in order to help them make connections and further their learning. A seemingly small change in writing spaces led to a significant change in teaching and learning.